My name is Joseph Wunderlich. I'm a professor of engineering, architecture, and computer science. This is a lecture on Japanese people, urban design, and architecture. I'll go very rapidly. I'd like students to come back, take the time to look at the PDF version of this and click on all the links and read more carefully. If you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a PDF posted below in the comments. I've taught 7 different architecture courses at Elizabethtown College. I've been here 21 years. Also, actually mostly known for computer engineering. You can find details of these courses on my website, linked to here for the architecture. This is related to this talk. There's pictures from 2013 trip to Japan where I was a keynote speaker at a conference in Osaka. Firstly, about the people of Japan. These are key terms given to me by a colleague of mine, Mahua Bhattacharya, a professor of Japanese, who often comes and guest lectures in my courses about Japanese words and culture. Also, Nobuo Takahashi, another professor of Japanese, comes in and guest lectures, and I've also sat in both of their courses. So Nobuo Takahashi's linguistics class, Japanese 1, and Dr. Bhattacharya's Japanese art and aesthetics course. So I'll list some of these words as they seem appropriate to the slides. This is a mother and son in Kyoto. Here's a picture taken by Franklin Wright in 1905 on the right with a father and son, and compared that to the one taken in 2013 by me on the left. This is a picture on the bullet train from Tokyo to Osaka. This is a picture showing Wa, the group harmony. It means group harmony. And I thought this was a good example. This is maybe a middle school, and they're all jumping rope in unison. This is a kindergarten in Kyoto. Here's the kindergartners, all wearing the same white hat and uniforms. Here's a group of a little bit older students in collective group. Here's a couple students that were teaching us some Japanese, my son and I. This sign that they're making is typical of young girls. It's representative of a young girl that was in the Olympics a couple decades ago that didn't win, and she felt some shame, but when she came out of the contest, she made that peace sign. So now girls typically put that sign up when they pose for a picture. Here are students going through a train station in a very organized fashion, respecting each other's space, even though it's crowded. I felt that several times in Japan. Even though it can get crowded at times in places, people are very respectful of each other. Another large group of students with yellow hats stay as a group. This is presumably maybe their principal with all the classes together and the different students. Here's somebody pulling a rickshaw with people, and then a man with his dog. I thought that was an interesting picture. Some gardeners working together. Some signs that are informative and fun to look at also. And so you see one asking you to clean up after your dog poop, put out forest fires. That was actually in the middle of the woods. We found that one. A couple more signs, a human's well, a spa. On the bottom, don't get electrocuted. Hopefully self-explanatory. And then this one up on the top left is designating something historic in this crack. It's only a little tiny sign about the size of a quarter. This one is somewhat self-explanatory. Children playing, mother watching over them near the water. Interesting to note that in Japan there are more vending machines per capita than in any other country, and you can get all kinds of things in them. In Kyoto, there's the college, university, as well as a kindergarten in one place. Here are some of the students going to the college, and my son, 15 years old, turned 16 in Kyoto, showing off some of his balance skills. I didn't ask him to do that, but I didn't mind so much, and the students thought it was fun. Some girls out of uniform here. My son took this picture. A couple ladies in the park. Painting. Now the geisha are trained to be hosts. They're not prostitutes. They're cultural symbols of what Japanese, I believe, think is some of the best qualities of traditional Japanese life. So they're experts in the tea ceremony and in theater and in etiquette. And that's the idea of the geisha. And here they are. Here, these posts, each one of them, the sign, the pickets, I believe, represents a remembrance of somebody. I'd have to verify that. I think somebody told us that. There, I didn't research that. This is interesting. This is a statue of a female samurai. The Japanese graveyard. It's a shrine. The Japanese are both Shinto and Buddhist. The Shinto stems from originally the Taoist religion in China, mixed with the indigenous religions of Japan. It's, I believe, has to do with the spirits, the ancients, their ancestors, as well as spirits of things in nature. And then the Buddhism is a way of life. So I've heard people say that you're born Shinto and you die Shinto, but you live a Buddhist life. I believe these are ribbons in remembrance of people, or maybe just representing prayers. I'm not sure about that. Now we were shopping. This is, when we shop, this is the market that's right near our house. They cover with a roof that keeps out the water but lets in the sun. And a lot of nice little places to buy things. That's where we did our main shopping. And then our last day of almost 2 weeks in Kyoto, we went to a shopping mall just to see how that would look. And this is what we found in the shopping mall, some interesting labeling on shirts. I'm not sure what this means, Watts. I've heard that the Japanese will use English words sometimes without worrying too much about the literal meaning, just for fun. Just want feeling at all, I guess that makes sense, but not good to you. That's somewhat interesting. I'm not sure the meaning of this, although I can kind of guess. I mean, it's obvious what it's stated, but why would you want to be self-identified this way? Unless they think it's a cool thing maybe from the West to do that, which is not too far-fetched. This is truly bizarre. We kept the TV on all the time. We only listened to Japanese. Couldn't find anybody to speak English, or we didn't really want to. It was all Japanese people in Kyoto, and all kinds of strange shows would come on at night, and it was just fun to watch how everybody behaved without fully understanding or even partially understanding what they were doing. This is sort of like that. An arcade, not too dissimilar to what you see in the United States, maybe a little more packed in. And again, here are all the words from Mahabhacharya, and I put them up here again before we move on to some other things in this lecture, just to speak to how that when you raise the children, when I observe children, how they're raised in Japan, it's very important, I believe, that they have a certain character, quality of character instilled and philosophy instilled in them. And so this is a children's story. This is a store then with some other things, in addition to some of those labeling on those t-shirts that are somewhat a reference to Western culture, specifically the United States, it looks like here. And so it's cool to be on the beach and surf, and I think that's what this store is about. Now that we've talked about the people, I want to go talk first about urban design and then architecture within that urban design context. These are typical things talked about in any urban design lecture or course. These are Kevin Lynch is the author of a book, sometimes referred to as Lynchian analysis, paths, nodes, landmarks, edges, and districts. Start first with paths. Now I have some slides here, excerpt from my lecture series on architecture theory. I have a whole course on architecture theory, and this is a lecture on circulation. So we talk about paths now, and first rail lines. This is the Tokyo rail system. Very complex, very clean, very efficient, extremely on time, extremely clean. We saw a kindergartner with a lunchbox, only 5 years old, going or less, or somewhere that 5 or 6 maybe, by himself, early in the morning, getting on the subway. Extremely safe in Japan. This is in Tokyo. We didn't spend any time in Tokyo. We just traveled from Narita, where the new Tokyo airport is, which is about 60 miles outside of Tokyo, in a historic town worth visiting itself. And then we just took a rapid train and then got on the bullet train to Osaka. You may think that bullet trains are a rare thing. These trains come every 10 minutes to the second. I mean, exactly to the second. And there's an abundance of them. And they'll go up to 200 miles an hour. I believe they've been clocked as much as 250, maybe 300 now recently. They don't always travel that fast, but you'll routinely get up to 200 miles an hour. Now this is another rail. This is an old ancient steam rail line on the western side of Kyoto. We stayed on the eastern side of Kyoto. So we went here for my son's birthday when he was turning 16. Here's an HO model railroad. Looks like HO gauge. I collect HO model railroads. I collect a number of different gauges, so I found this interesting. And it speaks to architecture, I believe, too. I played model railroads. That's all I wanted from the time I was in a high chair. My dad put a circle around the high chair and then made a controller for me to use. And then that's all I wanted for birthdays and Christmases. Still what I like, actually. I'm almost 60 now, born 1961. So this is where the steam locomotive train originates on to go alongside one of the 2 rivers that run through Kyoto. This is the one on the west side. It's going to follow that river. And on the train, as in most of the places we were in Kyoto, I don't believe we saw anybody who wasn't Japanese in all of Kyoto for almost 2 weeks. This is a vacation spot for the Japanese people, so we're riding with them. It seemed like about 2 hours, maybe not that long, going up the river to where we're going to get on a river ride. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So now, paths of water. The drainage is not just functional in Japan, but aesthetic as well. And you could imagine that Frank Lloyd Wright says form followed function, which he didn't mean the form comes after it. He meant it in a symbiotic yin and yang kind of balanced way. Form and function are intertwined as one. He clarified that for everybody later on. And actually it was Louis Sullivan who said it first, who was his mentor, and then it has ancient historical reference even before that. But what Frank Lloyd Wright meant is it's a balance. So this is aesthetic as well as functional. You can watch a video on this and come back. Also, you see in the bottom picture a rain chain, which is functional downspout as well as aesthetic. This is the canal near where we stayed in Kyoto. Beautiful canal, willows weeping over both sides. A long canal, maybe 10 city blocks. The canal fed into this larger river, and here's a picture of a man catching a fish fishing with his son. That's a picture of me in the bottom. And then here's our river ride. So this was now the river on the other side of the Kyoto, from where the canal fed into a different river. And so this is the river that we came down after we rode the steam engine up to the top of the river on my son's birthday. And we rode it down to this place that's called Monkey Mountain, and then climbed up this almost 2,000-foot mountain. And I'll tell you a story about the monkeys in a second. So we're still talking about urban design here, Japanese urban design, and paths specifically. Now by foot, we just talked about by rail and by water. Here's a nice footpath. Here is the hike picture of when we got to close to the top of Monkey Mountain after taking a rail ride, steam engine, up this river, the river next to this, and then coming down on a river ride. And then we hiked up to Monkey Mountain. So there's about maybe 30, 40 monkeys around here, and you can feed them inside, only inside of this caged house. And we found out in a second why that was true, because this mother let this baby monkey come over to my son, and he fed it, and he fed the mother, and they were happy. And then a big male one, about twice the size of the female hare, jumped up, seemed bigger than all the other males, probably the head of the clan there. And my son was annoyed by that because he scared the mother, and the big giant one scared the female and the baby away. And so he started playing, try to grab the pebble out of my hand, which we had learned from watching Kung Fu episodes. I know Kung Fu's Chinese, not Japanese, but we watch those, and we like Chinese culture as well. And so he was playing, grab the pebble from my hand with the food, with the giant monkey. Well, he did it 2 times, and the monkey was getting noticeably irritated each time. And the 3rd time he did it, the giant monkey climbed on the roof, started banging on the whole roof, and all the monkeys ran around screaming for about a half hour. Here's a picture of the nice baby monkey and the mama and baby before the big giant male came and messed up the fun. So here's some larger paths for walking, and you see this tunnel underneath the railroad track here with beautifully laid brick and a spiral pattern, very difficult craftsmanship. And then on the bottom picture here is of the bamboo forest that was actually close to where the steam engine was on the other side of the town of Kyoto. Here's some more larger paths going through a Buddhist temple area in both cases. Well, in the bottom right-hand corner is actually a neighborhood street, and you can see the drainage canal for the water. There's also architectural, and it's has beautiful plants also. Here are walking paths, also for bicycles and deliveries, but not any main traffic for cars, alongside the canal that runs through for about 10 blocks in the neighborhood that we stayed at in Kyoto for almost 2 weeks. And here are some larger paths for jogging and bike riding along the main river that our canal fed into. Here's a picture of a couple other paths. This is near the Old Town, which is just one of the 60 sites. The whole Old Town is just one historic site of the 60 in Kyoto. And then you see the upper right here, the inside of a temple. Here's a path through, this is a huge Japanese garden in Narita. And I took this picture in 2013. And you can compare it to one taken by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1905 in Nagoya on the right. Very tranquil, meditative place. Some place you want to just sit for a while and breathe. Now, still speaking about paths and by foot, And so we want to speak of steps, and you'll see more slides from my architecture theory course on the lecture on circulation. This is an assignment, actually a lecture that went along with the studio course, I believe, or maybe it was with the architecture theory class. Yes, it was. About bridges and comparing different bridges. More on bridges, beautiful footbridges. One in a park. This is an interesting story here where, now this is in 2013, people do wear face masks in Japan. I've seen it in other countries too when they come to conferences, just out of good hygiene if they're sick or just to protect themselves from places that could be contaminated. This, I've seen this a long time now, many years, early 2000s also. But so this girl's wearing a mask, and that's not uncommon. She has an umbrella. It's not raining. They have an umbrella because it was bright sun. They use the umbrellas to block the sun as well as rain. Now the clogs are not typical, and she's going across here on clogs, and her girlfriends are waiting for her, kind of giggling. And it had rained earlier, but it's not raining at the moment. She doesn't need the umbrella. And she seems a little worried, and somebody's for some reason coming across the bridge at the same time, and that's worrying her too. So my son decides he's going to help her after the two girls pass on the bridge, and she misunderstood, so she just kind of sat down, and all her friends were giggling, and my son was already all wet because from the rain. He's playing in the creek too, but it was funny, and everybody had a chuckle. This is me standing on the bridge. And I guess it's presumed everybody has good enough balance, even if you're on clogs and passing somebody in rain, that you don't need guardrails. Now, this would not pass safety codes in the United States. And I'm not going to say that's a good or a bad thing. It's just I see the beauty of keeping these bridges just the way they are. One last slide on walking around by foot. We just found this restaurant. We're not sure what was going on there. It was closed when we went by, but American. And I caught a picture of my son right under the arrow pointing us in there. So now, continuing with urban design, landmarks are next. So you can navigate by landmarks. There's different ways people navigate. Now everybody just uses their computer in the car. I particularly personally like maps, old style maps, and viewing things or thinking about things from above. But people, sometimes you give people directions. They want to go by landmarks, and so how do people navigate their space, the paths that they use? So and not just paths, but how do you get from one place to another and reference a context of where you are? This is a huge Shinto symbol for a gate, for the symbol between the human world and the world of the spirits. I believe this may be the tallest thing in all of Kyoto, and they have height restrictions just to keep a context to the city, of a historical context. But you can see a tractor trailer truck down at the bottom here. It gives you the size of this. Here's another symbolic landmark, spiritual. And another one. Yes, we couldn't resist gonging it just a little bit, and we did get scolded for that. I don't know where the person came from. It didn't seem like anybody was around. We were out there pretty early in the morning. Well, maybe that's why they came. A couple other things that you can use as landmarks. They don't have to necessarily have spiritual significance. These just happen to. Landmarks can be anything that you use as a reference that are of significant importance, that everybody would know what you're talking about. And a couple more shrines, religious context to them. Landmarks. Now, next we want to talk about nodes. So paths connect at nodes. I put landmarks first because people often navigate by landmarks. But nodes are related to paths and where they cross and connect. So this is a shopping street in Kyoto. My son got a kimono fitted by a must have been over 90-year-old woman. Didn't speak any English. She spent about an hour with him measuring him. And we only paid like $15 for it. It was just a really nice experience. Now, this particular node is a Buddhist temple or collection of temples. It's and Shinto shrines. This one area has many buildings in it, and a little garden and pond. And it's all one of the 60 preserved sites in Kyoto. And this is a node, connects a number of pathways. Here's another set of cross streets in an area where the geisha were, and it's also a separate historic area. This is actually in Osaka, and this was a park at the intersection of two city blocks. Osaka is the second biggest city next to Tokyo in Japan. A gazebo in the middle of the water, near a couple paths, in a huge Japanese garden in Narita. Picture of me standing at that node. Now, edges define boundaries and also places where gateways will be, because that's how you get through the boundaries. So these are have religious significance. Each one of these stones also, they also happen to be defining an edge of an area. Again, we see this large shrine here. Now it's acting as not a landmark, but as a gateway, so penetrating the edge. This is another gateway. This is right leading up to Kyoto College and kindergarten. Districts, I only listed a couple of them here, but every area has certain districts with certain themes, certain usages, or cultural significance. You can make boundaries based in different ways. There are also municipal districts, school districts, fire engine or fire company districts, police districts, as well as hospital districts, and then cities will have a Chinatown, a Japantown, right? Little Italy. So this is looking over the top of Kyoto, and they have height limitations. I guess that couple buildings are pretty tall, though. I don't have that shrine in this picture, the gateway. There are sacred districts, as we mentioned already. These Buddhist areas, it's not just one temple. There's a whole area, a group of buildings is a district. This is also a district, sacred space, part of one of the temple areas. The large parks, the large Japanese gardens could be considered a district. Another picture of that. A very nice video. These Japanology plus one, or just plain Japanology videos, there's two kinds. They're really good to watch. I don't typically just play a video, but I would like people to come back and do take a look at these. Now, we've talked about urban design. First, we talked about people, then the urban design, and then the architecture within the urban design. Now, so this is a picture on the left taken by me in 2013, one by Frank Lloyd Wright on the right. And I didn't have these pictures before I went to Japan of his. I just saw some similarities. And when the archive of his was finally released and got into Columbia University, or I found it online actually. This is a quote by Frank Lloyd Wright. And Frank Lloyd Wright always loved Japanese things from the very beginning. In the last decade of the 1800s, he went to the Chicago World's Fair, saw an exhibition of Japanese architecture, and then about 10, 12 years after that, when he was already a successful architect, went to Japan, designed and designed the Imperial Hotel in Japan, and over a 5-year period, was frequently there. I've seen it said that he spent more than 3 full years in Japan, and so he was always influenced by Japanese things, even though he hesitated admitting it. But this is a quote I found out of one of his books. It says, and it's by him, this quote: "The West could not have easily seen an indigenous organic architecture, civilizations based on cultural inspiration, chiefly Buddhism, could. My work is in that deeper philosophical sense." Now, here are some details that we go into in architecture theory class, and these slides are worth mentioning, worth reading, coming back and reading over if you're going to have an assignment or you choose to do something, if you're assigned to do something specifically Japanese, or if you choose to do a Japanese design. You should look at this Ken system. And it's actually a modular system, we'll see, based on the tatami mat size as a unit size. And Frank Lloyd Wright was very big on certain modular unit sizes. And it stems back to his four-bow block playing, as well as presumably some of the influence he had here in the modularity in this Japanese design. So do come back and take a look at, read this. Take a look at this and the dimensions, this proportionality. This is now in the proportion and scale lecture on my architecture theory course. Here are the tatami mats. Each of the little rectangles is a tatami unit mat size. And then the larger areas are multiples and ways of organizing those units. And Frank Lloyd Wright followed this. Most literally in his textile houses that you can see around the same time that he had been in Japan. When he lives in California, that's where he made the textile houses of precast concrete with different designs on the front, that modularity. But he also did modular things in other contexts also. So do come back and read what it says here about Japanese design. I'll be most likely looking for that if you do any kind of Japanese design in any of my courses. Another picture of an elevation, of 2 elevations. So this is now from the principles lecture within architecture theory. It gives a couple select slides here talking about rhythm, looking at the roofs. Also datum, organization of spaces. And then just some pictures that we took, my son and I, while we were visiting. So this is a Buddhist temple. You get a feel for the space here, sacred space. The inside-outside nature of it, very important and very much influenced Frank Lloyd Wright in how he saw spaces. He would extend materials directly inside and outside the building, same materials. He would use perceived walls, where the cascade of bands of windows open up the inside and outside, let it flow. You see that's common in Gawa designs, ancient architectural work of, and still implemented recently in Japan. And I'm sure that influenced him. Most scholars researching Frank Lloyd Wright would agree to that, even though Frank Lloyd Wright would hesitate admitting it. Japanese sacred space, Buddhist temple. Here's a picture of me, perhaps not being too modest. It was hot, so I didn't wear sleeves, but in retrospect, maybe it'd be a little more modest going through the temple. There were people who dressed very casual, but so here's this in Gawa. Now, you may have seen this in other lectures with me in other courses that I ask you to look at this. And this is it's interesting. It's kind of comical the way that some of it, but it's not meant to be a joke. It's a very uh, good insight into not just the architecture, but what it represents of the behavior of the people in the culture and their beliefs and their feel for nature. And Frank Lloyd Wright, he was inspired by that, and it also matched up with Frank Lloyd Wright, his youth being in Wisconsin on farmland, and the Unitarian belief system, which is very much focused on nature, and also through the Froebel methods that his mother did with the homeschool teaching. So if you read enough about the different influences on Frank Lloyd Wright, which you can see in my lecture series on Frank Lloyd Wright, which you may be watching this lecture as part of that, that it all makes sense. It all comes together. So here's a little more specifics on that. Um, this is from lecture series on architecture theory, and also want to have an interiors on materials and methods course. It's also on my YouTube channel. You can find that one. This lecture I'm doing right now should be on YouTube channel as well. But the open floor plan, often attributed to Frank Lloyd Wright, is not an original thought of his. I mean, he certainly pioneered it in the United States, and he had over 500 built designs of almost 1,000 that he designed. Arguably the world's greatest architect, and I would agree with that. Over a 70-year span, he did so much architecture. But some of his ideas were not his own. It can't be. Everybody works off of inspirations of others, but he had an ego and didn't want to admit it. So anyway, the open floor plan is common in that Frank Lloyd Wright used. It's common in Japan with movable screens for separating spaces, and Frank Lloyd Wright saw this in 1892 in Chicago, and then in Japan on his trip. Perceived separations via window door bands, colonnades, furnishing, lighting, changes in ceiling heights, and strategically aligning lines of sight between spaces. Now that's a compilation of things I've learned over the years in different places, so I don't have a citation for that. That's just design principles. But you don't need a literal wall to make a separation. You can have a separation between spaces and still have connectivity and have an open floor plan while they're connected, right? You can have a kitchen and a living room right next to each other now. It's common, right? Didn't used to be in Victorian times. So, destroy the box was something Frank Lloyd Wright's known for stating, to break down those walls, open up the space. And presumably a lot of that influence came from seeing things in Japan and reading about it before he ever went. Here's a picture we took. These nets are to keep the pigeons away. Takes a little bit away from the aesthetic, but you have to protect it. These are ancient buildings. Another ancient building. This is my son walking through town, looking at some modern Japanese buildings now. Often modular, mass-produced things in a factory, and they bring them in by crane. We did find, and there are amazing hand craftsmanship still preserved in the trades there to this day. But the Japanese will also mass produce things, and extremely efficiently, and some of their housing. And this looks like mass produced housing, although it still has a nice aesthetic effect, quality to it, even though I believe these are the mass produced modular prefab units that you bring in with a crane and stack them. May not be, but I believe so. Now this is interesting, something ancient squeezed, or more historic squeezed in between two modern buildings. Not so nice on either side, but that happens. You can't control all developers in putting up quality architecture. Some developers will not even hire an architect and just put up something for purely money reasons. But I believe good architecture commands a higher dollar, so they should balance that. This is a novel kind of thing, squeezing this design. This is modern, but it's squeezed in between two other modern buildings. It's kind of tastefully done. It's a postmodern kind of thing with that Chippendale roof, right? Reminds you of a Philip Johnson kind of postmodern building in New York. Now this is in the old town of Kyoto, and you could see the attention to old craftsmanship here. This is actually using the original bend of a tree, it looks like. Now, they may have steamed and bent that, but to me it looks like they're honoring the actual original bend of the wood, which would not be unusual for the ethic, the ethos of Japanese art and architecture, design, carpentry. Here's my son in front of a little more recent piece of architecture, work of architecture. Japanese garden, very common, even in small houses. People tend very carefully to their plants. A little bit more of that. You can see the care taken to shape and prune these trees, and they look very healthy. Here's a modern architectural work with a running fountain through it. If you come back and click on the video here, you can see there's a fountain, there's a waterfall running, falling in front of these windows. This is another ancient temple now, ancient craftsmanship you can see in the wood. And here's some roofs. Here's the construction of some roofs, some heavy timber construction, mortise and tenon, finely cut miters. This is actually the town at the top of the river that we took the steam engine to, and then rode the river ride down to Monkey Mountain that we climbed. Now this was a station in mid-Kyoto, more modern, but still great attention to detail, and a beautiful mix of wood and steel. You can see here the fine craftsmanship and the tight joining of timbers, and this is not new construction, so there's no splitting or warping or joints coming apart in this old construction. It's very well crafted, and the treating of the wood, the harvesting of the trees, and the assemblage of the carpentry is very meticulously done in Japan. They do paint the end grains often to keep water from wicking in and warping things. Often, though, they will leave wood untreated and have it age and just let it rot as part of the life cycle. Times they'll just let things rot and then rebuild them in a ceremonial sense. But I believe the white on the ends here looks like it's preserving the wood from the weather and aging. Again, we're speaking about water here. We're looking at details. This is a collection of rainwater done in a beautifully architectural way. Now, you can't really use a rain chain on it. This is a multi-story building. But you can grab that water. And on the right, you see it also collecting the water. And this is where it's going. So this in ancient times was to collect your drinking water. And it's still done to some extent in parts of Japan. Some more details. These are all architectural details of a koi pond, and then a light standard next to the water in the canal. Here up above you see these translucent panels that give separation by that light through, and you can see the plants growing on the other side. On the bottom left here is, and up in the mountains in the forest, we found this little tree preserved from eroding away, presumably on a slope by this woodwork that you see. And then on the right is a picture I took of a tree, and I think that's representative of the organic design of the Japanese as well as Frank Lloyd Wright. Some details here, a little door up on the left and a shrine on the bottom left, but what I'm looking at mostly here is the larger picture on the right here, and you see that they're using the actual tree with the bark removed, but you can see that it's just the actual surface of the tree, and then they work with that form, preserving that form. Now, switching to a little more of modern things, the Japanese are experts on mixing new and old. And so our room was very modern, and it wasn't large, but it was extremely efficient. This is the fire escape. This wouldn't work in the United States building codes, but the way the fire escape there worked is you just open a hatch from the balcony above and you jump down to the balcony below. And it was a three-story building, so you just do that over and over again, I guess. And then you see how they're channeling the rainwater on the balcony in the bottom picture. This is our a view of some bathrooms. This toilet is not uncommon still in Japan and other places too, where you squat down. Now, this was not in our hotel. This was in the park. And then you see the bottom picture, and on the right there is a very sophisticated heated mixed bidet toilet system, electrical. And then you notice the floor drain there. You can actually hose down, and we didn't need to wash it, but everything in there looks like you could just hose the entire place down, and everything would go in that drain, which makes sense. Now some details, some stone cutting, as you would expect in Japan. It's very highly, efficiently, high quality work. Some sculptures, the street, a little more stonework, stone bench, and then it looks like a cutout of a single slab of stone, and curved is this bridge that my son is sitting on in the park. Now, my son and I decided to go to a building supply store just to see the basic building blocks that they use. And so, as you would imagine, you find some good quality timbers and wood products, as well as you can see in the bottom right here, simulated wood, ceramic kind of products that look like wood. Some very interesting selection of masonry that you can use. Seems structural as well as aesthetic. Pavers, great selection of pavers, different colors and textures and sizes, shapes, patterns. Ceramic bowls as well as stone, cut stone, different types of cut stone. This is inside the building store, section of lighting, lamps, and fixtures. Now, here's something that seems perhaps not related, but it is very much, because these students that I had for 10 years in a course with me did both architecture and judo in the same course, and a soft style of judo focusing on philosophy, culture, character development, and biomechanics. I promoted all of them, up 200 students over the 10 years, up to second degree brown belt. Rarely would take them to competition. This was more of a soft judo kind of thing, where you compete hard after you've been conditioned for about a month. No doing any judo until you get conditioned, and then it should be soft, stand up straight, and it's like a chess match. Now, you got to be strong when you do it, and it gets very physical, but you need to have control, and you don't even see that so much now, unfortunately. I'm going to post this on YouTube. I might get somebody commenting, but the Olympics, and even in the Olympics, it's turned into more like mixed martial arts, and that's not the way I taught this course in this context in the college, for safety reasons as well. It's I competed in judo, and I've done that kind of hard judo. It's really not what I was aiming for with these students, and really not a sustainable thing over the years. I'm almost 60, and I haven't done a judo in a while, but if I do, it's going to be soft style again. And so these students, the architecture that they did, they designed different towns in Minecraft. They ran public servers. This is a whole other story you can look into, multiple worlds, and tons of information there. configured SQL Server, and did a bunch of stuff. Turned off certain things so students wouldn't damage each other's work, or turned off cursing, and logged in the database so that I could reverse damage to people's buildings and things like that, and also figure out if people did things they weren't supposed to. So, there's a long story to that you can read about and click on if you like. All these students were promoted in judo simultaneously in the same course through the USJA, which I am a member, and I've got my black belt through two different places: a traditional, ancient, more philosophical type of judo professor or teacher, sensei, Grandmaster Chang. You can read all about him, and also by Gary Goltz, the president of the USJA, runs the biggest club in the world in judo, and read about it if you like. Now, architecture, this is what they did specifically, so you can look through this, and you can see the course definitely had architectural content, and they had to publish a paper in addition, or write a paper, not publish it, but give me a scholarly paper written to scholarly standards. And this is an example of one of those papers, a very good one, by a student, Sammy Eisdorf. And then finishing up here, you could see, I posted this in the beginning, but the judo and architecture and some of what I believe influenced Frank Lloyd Wright through philosophy as well as design, culture of Japan. It can be somewhat represented by these words. So now I'm teaching a new course that I've done now 6 or 7 years in a row. After I had taught the judo course for 10 years, the judo and architecture combined freshman seminar. I also had another freshman seminar before that was called Exploring, Defining the Limits of Machine Intelligence. Did that a couple of years. Did the judo and architecture one for 10 years. Now it's been going on maybe 7 or 8 years. I got to look back for this purely architecture course called Conceptual Architecture. And there's Japanese design requirements in that course. You can see at some of the models here. I have them learn about Frank Lloyd Wright and also about Japanese architecture. Then they have to make a Japanese style house as well as a barn frame, and then a barn, and then a farmhouse, and then their final design should draw inspiration from all of that. So on my website, you can find this architecture page and links to all of my architecture courses and learn more about all of these courses and all the content if you like. And then if you go to my main website, you'll see also pages, a lot of courses on computer engineering as well. I'm perhaps known by many people more for that. I was purely in architecture until age 30, including almost 2 undergraduate degrees, one in architectural engineering, University of Texas, very close to only a couple courses short from a second degree in urban design, University of California, San Diego. And then a lot of projects in Texas, California, and Pennsylvania, including managing architecture, engineering, and construction of $100 million of development in Texas and California, my own projects in different states, a couple of small businesses, estimating businesses, renovation businesses. I even did partly a property management business for a little bit when I was working for one developer just to maintain some of the projects that had already been built. So there's a whole story behind all that you can read on my CV and in other places. But now computer engineering, I'm just about 59 years old now, born in 1961. Until I was 30, I was purely in buildings, and I still keep up with some architecture things, but I went back, master's, PhD in electrical computer engineering, did IBM research, designed a couple of neural network processors, was a professor at Purdue University, also a couple of years at AI DuPont Children's Hospital in robotics, and did robotics automation research and published on that. So, most people maybe might know me for that, but I've done both, and I find ways of cross-pollinating. I've got high-performance machines with running Revit software with the concurrent database, full professional versions for the students, as well as gaming engines to port the designs into, to animate them, and the Lumion 3D Studio Max. Most recently, also virtual reality, uh, porting into that. And so, I believe all this architecture belongs together. I'm an architect of machines and buildings.